Good morning, I'm Maiki Oreta and you're watching Business 360, where we break down the numbers, connect the dots, and give you the developments and the insights you need to navigate, adapt, and lead. Let's dive right in. The Trump administration strips Harvard of its authority to enroll international students, sparking outcry from global academic and business communities. Malacanang says President Marcos's call for cabinet resignations is designed to weed out underperformers and push a results-driven government. Murder charges are filed against the lone suspect in the deadly shooting of 2 Israeli embassy workers outside a Washington, D.C. museum. Global markets trade mixed overnight, with U.S. stocks ending flat as investors digest new tax measures and shifting yield trends. On Wall Street, stocks recover early. Losses Thursday after Treasury yields pull back following the House's passage of President Donald Trump's tax and spending bill. Concerns over a swelling U.S. deficit had earlier lifted longer-dated yields, pressuring equities. But yields eased later in the session, giving markets a brief reprieve.
What's so interesting from a technical standpoint is, as technicians, we are only really concerned about the reaction to the event as opposed to the event itself. So if we put that in the context of the market recently, rates have been moving higher steadily on a variety of concerns, but one of them certainly is the bill that was just passed. And so we come into this morning, the 30-year bond yield hits that 5.15 level, just 3 basis points between the high, below the highs that we had in October 2023, and begins to reverse. So technically, at least in the short term, interest rates are overbought, bond prices are oversold, and we're starting to get that near-term reversal. It's way too early at this point to conclude that we're still not going to see higher rates. But the fact that the reaction to the bill this morning, I think, is a very encouraging sign.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P 500 finished flat, with the S&P 500 slightly lower. The Nasdaq outperforms, rising 0.3%. Over in Europe, major indexes close in the red. London's FTSE 100 sheds 0.5%. Germany's DAX loses 0.5%, while France's CAC 40 slips 0.6%. Now, a sweeping move from Washington. The Trump administration revokes Harvard University's authority to enroll international students, sparking concern across global education and immigration circles. U.S. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem has terminated Harvard's certification under the Student and Exchange Visitor Program, effectively stripping the university of its ability to accept foreign students. The decision means existing international students must transfer to other schools or face loss of their legal status. The action follows Harvard's refusal to turn over the conduct records of foreign students requested by the Department of Homeland Security last month. DHS accuses Harvard of allowing anti-American agitators on campus and failing to protect Jewish students, claiming the university has become a platform for pro-terrorist elements. It also says Harvard has hosted and trained Chinese paramilitary members as recently as 2024, a charge the university strongly denies. In a statement, Harvard describes the decision as unlawful and politically motivated, warning it will cause serious harm to its community and damage America's global standing in higher education. For many in the Philippines, where Harvard remains a top destination for the country's brightest students and executives, the move raises new questions about U.S. policy uncertainty and the future of international academic exchange. Here at home, the Philippine Statistics Authority is laying the groundwork for a new way to measure economic growth, one that factors in the environment. During the ceremonial signing of the implementing rules and regulations of the Philippine Ecosystem and Natural Capital Accounting System Act, National Statistician Claire Dennis Mapa announced that the PSA will begin producing a natural capital-adjusted version of GDP within 5 years. This approach, part of a roadmap extending through 2040, will go beyond current environmental accounting by formally measuring the impact of economic activities on nature. Mapa explained that the new system will be aligned with the United Nations Framework for Environmental Economic Accounting, which includes standards for reporting, monitoring, and data timelines. For the Philippine business community, the shift signals a growing push towards sustainability, with long-term implications for policymaking, ESG disclosures, and green investments. The Philippines is set to seal its first ever free trade deal with a Middle Eastern country next month, marking a strategic shift in the country's trade and investment ties beyond Asia and the West. The agreement, known as the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, or CEPA, will be finalized with the United Arab Emirates following a final legal review. It covers trade in goods and services, investments, customs procedures, and cooperation for small and medium enterprises. Negotiations started in 2022, and officials described the deal as a historic milestone that could open new markets for Philippine exporters and attract more capital from the Gulf region. In the lead up to the signing, a delegation of 17 companies from Dubai is set to visit Manila, eyeing potential investments in the hospitality and energy sectors. The CEPA is expected to boost trade diversification, strengthen economic diplomacy, and create new growth opportunities in the Middle East. ASEAN leaders gather in Malaysia this May 26th to 27th, with artificial intelligence, U.S. tariff hikes, and the civil war in Myanmar set to dominate the agenda at the 46th ASEAN Summit. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is expected to support a regional position against retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods and reinforce calls for a peaceful resolution to the ongoing Myanmar crisis. The summit will also tackle AI governance and cross-border digital transformation, with a growing focus on how emerging technologies impact regional competitiveness and security. Foreign Affairs Deputy Assistant Secretary Dominic Imperial confirms that talks on a code of conduct with China in the South China Sea will continue, with the ASEAN eyeing a final agreement by 2026. President Marcos is set to join 9 leadership sessions and hold bilateral meetings with Laos, Kuwait, and Vietnam, with trade, energy, and migrant worker issues on the table. A section of the Sierra Madre mountain range in Isabela appears stripped of its forest cover, fueling public outrage over the environmental impact of nickel mining operations in the area. Satellite images published by Brigada News show a large patch of land in Dinapigue, once verdant, now bare and brown, with clear signs of deforestation linked to mining activity. The images have gone viral, sparking sharp criticism from environmental groups and concerned citizens. In response, Dinapigue Mining Corporation asserts that its operations are located outside the boundaries of the Sierra Madre Natural Park and that they comply with all national and local regulations. The company adds that it holds the necessary permits from the Mines and Geosciences Bureau and relevant local government units. Dinapigue Mining is a subsidiary of Nickel Asia Corporation, led by Bilyonaryo Manny Zamora. The incident reignites debate over balancing natural resource extraction with environmental protection, a pressing concern as investors, regulators, and communities increasingly tie corporate growth to sustainable and responsible mining practices. We're taking a quick break. Please stay with us as we dive deep into the numbers and the narratives that matter most to your bottom line. Let's check on how Asian markets are doing this Friday morning. The Nikkei 225 is in the green, higher by 0.7%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index is trading to the upside as well, higher by 0.3%. Shanghai's composite is flat with an upward bias. Singapore's Straits Times Index is in the red, lower by 0.2%. Now, here at home, Philippine shares extended their losses Thursday, with the main gauge falling 1.1% to 63.05 as investors remain cautious amid the U.S. credit downgrade and uncertainty over President Marcos's midterm cabinet shakeup. Analysts say that the market may remain volatile in the near term, with investors looking for clarity on policy direction and global risk signals. Now, as of 10:13 this morning, the main gauge is in green, higher by 1% to 63.67. The broader all shares index index trading to the upside as well, higher by 0.6% to 37.29. As for the sub-indices, everything is in the green except for the mining and oil counter, which is bucking the market's current uptrend. It's lower by 1% in early trade. So far, total volume is at 117 million shares and value is at over 1 billion. Now, at the currency market, the peso opens weaker, slightly weaker at 58.68 to the greenback, lower from its previous close of 55.59. Malacanang clarifies President Bongbong Marcos's decision to call for courtesy resignations from his cabinet is part of an effort to weed out underperforming individuals. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro says that the president's bold reset is focused on performance and urgency and stresses that government programs and services will continue without disruptions despite the ongoing cabinet shakeup. The move comes on the heels of a disappointing midterm election for the administration's senatorial slate, which Malacanang acknowledges as a signal for change. A majority of the president's cabinet secretaries have since complied and submitted their courtesy resignations.
The people have spoken and they have expect results. Not politics, not excuses. We hear them and we will act. The request for courtesy resignations is aimed at giving the president the elbow room to evaluate the performance of each department and determine who will continue to serve in line with his administration's recalibrated priorities. Mananatili sila sa kanilang posisyon. Siguro ito yung tamang panahon para ipakita nila na dapat sila manatili sa kanilang posisyon. Pero kapag nakita po talaga ng Pangulo na hindi mo deserve ang iyong posisyon, you will be out.
One of the biggest business groups in the country expresses support for the president's economic team amid the ongoing cabinet revamp. Sujin Kim has the details.
Amid President Marcos's call for courtesy resignations from his cabinet, the Makati Business Club, one of the country's most influential business groups, expressed their strong statement of support for the current economic team.
We at Makati Business Club have a lot of respect, especially for the economic cluster. We like these guys. We think they're the best people for the job.
We expect them to be reappointed. These guys are well qualified for the position, so we would be very surprised if Marcos accepted their resignations and let them go.
I become a fan of this administration and the moves he's made. And I think coming from MBC, that says a lot.
If all of them or many of them will be replaced, it will be disruptive. So we are hoping that the president will be able to retain the really good ones. Mr. President, you have a good team. So hopefully your economic team, most of them anyway, are retained. No?
The MBC rated the current economic team a high 8 out of 10, citing not just performance but also the team's openness to consultation and continuous dialogue with the private sector. The group also praised the Agriculture Department under Secretary Francisco Tiu Laurel, highlighting improved engagement with businesses to tackle structural issues in the sector.
We pay among the highest in terms of food, and yet the producers of food are also the poorest in the country. Business has a huge role in accelerating the growth of agriculture and of course in addressing the economic conditions of many of our farmers. And so I think that is where the area where we could really have better collaboration, bigger collaboration. And we are very happy with Secretary Tiu Laurel.
Despite strong support, MBC clarified that this is not a blanket endorsement. The group admitted they are not 100% happy, pointing to specific issues, foremost among them the misallocation of national budget funds.
If I were to express a wish, and there's a new cabinet or some members of the cabinet, I wish they would take the national budget much more seriously. The diversion took away funds from very high priority projects of this administration itself, and went into things like ayuda and flood control projects, etc., which we know are really used for political purposes.
MBC trustee and FINMA chairman Ramon Del Rosario called on the administration to avoid politicizing the budget and to channel resources into education, infrastructure, and investment readiness, programs that could deliver long-term growth. Sujin Kim, Bilyonaryo News Channel.
The Philippine government enters a new chapter as President Bongbong Marcos calls for the courtesy resignation of his entire cabinet. The move, described by Malacanang as a bold reset, comes in the wake of midterm election losses, falling approval ratings, and mounting pressure to deliver results. While the president insists that this is about performance and not personalities, the business community is watching closely and with bated breath. Joining us now to weigh in on this development and more, and what it means for policy and investor confidence, is Makati Business Club's Executive Director, Apa Ongpin. Hi, Apa. Thank you for being here with us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Okay, so
Very
Apa,
happy to be here.
great to have you. We've got an interesting topic to mull over, the president's bold reset. I want to hear what first came to mind when you first thought about this and what the MBC as an organization feels about this. Let's start with your personal initial reaction.
Well, okay. As we said in the story that was just aired, we like this cabinet pretty much, especially the economic cluster, right? We think this is sort of a political move more than anything else. It's to show that the president means business and that he has the power to make these changes, and he's going to use it, right? But we, as we said, would be very surprised if he really accepts the resignation of more than a couple of people in the cabinet. I mean, there's a couple of people there who we think should go, but I'm not going to name names. But the economic cluster in particular, we think, is really pretty good.
Yeah. What is it, Apa, about the current economic cluster that the MBC likes so much? What is it about them that earned your respect?
Well, individually, they're all, qualified. They're not political appointees. They've been appointed on merit. These are guys who know what they're doing. They're pros, right? They're people that we would have endorsed for the position. And, I can go through them one by one and say, okay, this person, is really a good choice for this position.
And what would it mean, Apa, right now at this junction, just after the midterm elections, midway into the president's term, of course? What would it mean to stop that economic cluster in their tracks right now?
Well, you're risking a perception of instability, right? But it also sounds like you made a mistake in appointing these people in the first place, which I don't think is the case, right? So, as I said, we don't think he should replace any of these people in the economic cluster.
Yeah, and some of these guys, even not in the economic cluster, are really new into their job. There's DOTR Secretary Vince Dizon, there's DIT's Cristina Roque, and DICT's Henry Aguda. They just barely got their feet wet.
Exactly. And Roque, I mean, let's talk about Roque. Expectations were low because the perception was she's just some friend of, Flam. She didn't really have stature in the big business community and stuff like that, right? But in the short time she's been there, she has really exceeded a lot of expectations. She's very dynamic. She knows what she's talking about. And she's really a very good advocate for the SME sector that she came from. So she's a surprise. She's great. We like her.
Okay, fantastic. Presidents have reshuffled cabinets in the past, quietly and in part. Now, this bold move, this bold sweeping reset, asking for the resignation of the entire cabinet, what does this say about the leadership style and the next couple of years moving forward as we head into 2028?
Well, yeah, as I said, a lot of this is being done for the optics. Now, look at the way they've done it. They've said, okay, we're going to ask for everyone's resignation. They did not say who they're planning to replace and with whom, okay? Right now, they're listening. They're listening to this program, I guarantee you, to see what people think of this, right? So in a way, it's a trial balloon, right? This this government has actually been very good at listening. They listen, they engage. You know, there's the Presidential Business Advisory Council, for instance, and then, you know, people like Anton Lagdameo. He goes out there and listens to, you know, for the political, they're listeners, you know, and they will act based on what they think is the best course of action for them. So that's a leadership style that's pretty evident.
Okay, on another front, once again, the Philippines is making international headlines, you know, following the detention of former President Duterte at The Hague. You know, Bloomberg, Reuters, everyone has picked up the story of the cabinet reshuffle midterm. What message do you think this sends out to the broader investment community globally and to the broader business community here in the Philippines?
Well, they're not looking to send a message out to the investment community or something like this. But what it does say is that the administration is looking for excellence, right? And in other words, these are not political appointees who just are there to warm the seat. It wants performance. It demands performance, right? And I guess that's what they want to show. As you mentioned, other presidents have had cabinet shuffles in the past, and there are other presidents who didn't but should have.
Okay.
But so this shows. Look, their message is we're on the ball.
Yeah,
right?
as Malacanang says, this is a call for it's designed to weed out underperformers and push a results-driven government.
Exactly.
On that note, from your conversations with MBC members, what is the prevailing sentiment of the business community following this big development?
I don't want to speak on behalf of the whole business community. I mean, we're just the Makati Business Club, which is a certain sector of the business community. But for instance, Management Association of the Philippines has come out with an unequivocal message of support for the president's existing cabinet. They said, no, we support this cabinet, don't change them. At the same time, they've said, yeah, the president also has to make tough calls, right? And every CEO has to make these tough calls. So we support the president's actions. But we didn't want to go, we, Makati Business Club, didn't want to go that far, right? We did say and have said publicly, look, we really like the cabinet. We like this economic cluster in particular. And, please don't change them, right?
Yeah, but looking at it for what it is, for the country, what do you think would be the pros and cons of this big cabinet reshuffle?
Wow, it's hard to see. One of the pros is that it demonstrates that the executive branch, means business, and they're determined to extract the kind of results that they've planned, that are according to plan. So that's optics, really.
Yeah, you think it'll re-galvanize the Marcos cabinet?
Yeah, I mean, not that it really needed that much galvanization. There's a few guys in there. I'm not going to name names who are really dead wood. Every cabinet has these guys, and it would be great to change them. Yeah. But largely, the rest of the group, it's a good group. So it's already galvanized. You don't need to re-galvanize.
I'm not going to ask you who those are because I know you're not going to answer. But in terms of cabinet stability and the goals of this administration, growth of 6 to 8%, how important is cabinet stability to achieving these growth targets, reducing poverty, and really fixing the Philippines?
Well, you know, it's debatable how much effect it has. But I do know that, for instance, in certain industries, during the Duterte era, there were, I think, 5 different heads of the Maritime Industry Authority, or Marina, right? And it did not do well for that authority to keep having to change heads every few months. You know, it was crazy. But what do you call this? But they did it, you know, and those are mostly, you know, political appointees. There's a couple who are from the industry and who really qualified, including the first one. But you know, you shouldn't do that. You know, you make a choice that you can stick with, right? In the case of this cabinet reshuffle, well, you know, who knows? It depends on who he replaces.
Yeah, hopefully they do it quickly so that we can move on to other matters. Speaking of other matters, what are the top legislative economic priorities that you would like the new Congress, both the upper and the lower house, to move forward during the second half of this administration?
Yeah, we've made that very clear in terms of our agenda. We have number one bill that we're after is the People's Freedom of Information. Okay, it's very important to us, and this bill has been pending in Congress for like 30 plus years. Yeah. So I mean, various versions of this bill. Second are the Right-of-Way Act amendments.
For infrastructure.
For infrastructure, because infrastructure is really stalled right now because of right-of-way. and also because of budget magic. The E-Governance Act is very important to us. We represent a number of different tech industries, you know, and we really need some kind of e-governance modifications. Then we have the Lifelong Learning Bill. We have amendments to the Foreign Investors Long-Term Lease Act. We're trying to get the long-term lease from 50 years, renewable for 25, all the way to 99 years. You know, I mean, why not?
Yeah, yeah.
That's considered one of the problems of foreign investors in the Philippines is they can't own land.
All right.
But if they can get a 99-year lease on it, it's like owning land. Amendments to the charters of the Philippine Ports Authority and the Civil Aviation Authority of the Philippines, which will separate their development and regulatory functions.
Yeah.
That's very important to us.
Okay. Apa, you think, given the composition of this new Congress, do you think that they're going to have the willpower to push things forward? Or given the composition, might there be gridlock as we head towards 2028? What are your thoughts?
Well, none of these are really political bills. So, for instance, with the Freedom of Information Act, you have lawmakers of all stripes supporting it, right? In fact, that's the problem, no? There are so many bills pending in Congress that they don't want to consolidate because they're on different sides of the political fence. We've got to force them to consolidate. What we've managed to do, and thank you very much to Budget Secretary Amena Pangandaman, who is the star of this show. She was able to get the Senate to consolidate into one bill. So now our next task is to lobby Congress to accept that as the version, diba? Consolidate basically with the Senate.
Yeah, okay, well, we have high hopes for that. Apa, at this political and economic inflection point, what's MBC's message to the broader business community, you know, those trying to make sense of the situation and the ones just trying to work to move the country forward? What message could you give to them?
Well, you know, hang in there, obviously. But I think one of the things one of the advantages we have is with this administration and their political style, as I said, is that they engage and they listen. And let's use that, because it's really important for us to work together for progress,
And your message to the lawmakers and who will be stepping into this new cabinet?
Yeah, that's the same thing. I mean, look, let's engage, let's work together, let's get these things done, And, this was, as I said in our press con yesterday, the Makati Business Club was originally founded in 1981 under the father of Marcos to confront the government because the government wouldn't engage. They were stonewalling. So this is a big change in leadership style. This is a leadership that says, okay, we're listening. What do you want us to do? This is what we want to do, but what do you want us to do?
Right. Okay.
So it's a huge change.
All right. On a totally other front, this was just in, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this while we have you, Appa. In the U.S., Harvard and Trump. The Trump administration is basically barring Harvard from enrolling international students, and it's going to impact about 6,800 current international students. What are your thoughts on this from a business and competitiveness standpoint, for a premier educational institution like Harvard to be barred from accepting international students? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, it's it's completely irrational. One of the major competitive advantages that the United States has in the world is precisely its education and making that education open to international students. When you have such a huge body of international alumni, the relationships that these people have made with the Americans who went to the same school are invaluable. It really makes the U.S. a global player because these students later on go back to their own countries and get into power, and their experience in the U.S. has formed their So it's absolutely crazy actually to do this. The other thing is obviously completely political. Harvard and the Ivy League universities in general are considered basically hotbeds of liberalism, right? Which is in direct opposition to Trump's brand of authoritarian populism. And he hates that. So that's the only reason why he's doing this.
Yeah, well, politics all over the world. It's a sticky topic. All right, thank you so much, Appa Ongpen, the Executive Director of the Makati Business Club, for joining us this morning. We're taking a short break. Business 360 will be right back. Welcome back. Education Secretary Sunny Angara plans to revive the Adopt a School program as part of efforts to tackle the classroom shortage in public schools. In an interview with the Bilyonaryo News Channel's Trade Talks, Angara also expressed hopes of providing more laptop computers to public school teachers.
A very peculiar law to DepEd is and not at DepEd, but TESDA-CHED, to the education sector, is itong Adopt a School program. Companies are allowed to ay pwedeng mag-deduct ng 150% of the value of their donation from their taxable income. Sometimes when I talk to some of our partners, they forget or they don't know that may ganong programa. So I think it's incumbent upon DepEd to revive interest in this. Because it's a win-win.
The education chief said that they are in the final stages of reforming the high school curriculum. But on Thursday, Angara submitted his courtesy resignation in line with President Marcos's directive to all cabinet members. With that development, it remains unclear if these plans will move forward. The Anti-Red Tape Authority, or ARTA, launches a new reform guidebook to streamline regulations and improve the Philippines' standing in the global business arena. Called the Philippine Ease of Doing Business Reform Guidebook, the document serves as a medium-term blueprint from 2025 to 2028, focused on modernizing government services through digitalization, especially for business registration and renewal. Beyond entry of private firms, the guidebook also tackles themes like international trade, taxation, dispute resolution, business insolvency, and market competition, all considered crucial to boosting economic growth and attracting investments. The Department of Justice clears top government officials in a case filed by former President Rodrigo Duterte related to the service of an arrest warrant against Pastor Apollo Kibuloy. In a new resolution, the DOJ dismisses charges of malicious mischief and violation of domicile against PNP Chief Romel Marbil and former Interior Secretary Benhur Abalos. Prosecutors say there is no probable cause and that the two officials were not even present during the operation to serve Kibuloy's arrest warrant at the Kingdom of Jesus Christ compound in Davao City.
Of course, the recent one was in Davao kay Pastor Apollo Kibuloy, no? Medyo mahirap din yun dahil may warrant siya. We should implement the warrant. No? So when we implement, what if hindi namin nahuli? Kung hindi namin nakita, demandado kami lahat.
A Filipino green card holder awaits his deportation hearing, part of the broader immigration crackdown under U.S. President Donald Trump's second term. Reports say 42-year-old Max Londonio is being held at the Northwest Detention Center in Washington State. He was apprehended by U.S. Customs and Border Protection at the Seattle-Tacoma Airport after returning from a trip to the Philippines. Londonio relocated to the U.S. when he was just 12 years old. The migrant advocacy group Tanggol Migrante says he is the second Filipino green card holder detained since February. In response, several migrant organizations have staged protests, urging the Philippine Embassy and Consulate to intervene and provide support. On another front, dive tourism generates strong momentum for the Philippine economy, bringing in over 73 billion pesos in 2023, nearly double the previous year's revenue. The country now boasts around 120 certified dive spots, solidifying its status as one of Asia's premier dive destinations. To support this growing market, the government is installing hyperbaric chambers in key locations like Boracay and Cebu, according to Tourism Promotions Board COO Margarita Nograles. These chambers are critical for treating decompression sickness, a risk associated with deep diving. The Philippines also secured nearly 280 million pesos in sales leads from recent dive expos in South Korea and in Singapore. And for the sixth consecutive year, the country was named the world's leading dive destination at the World Travel Awards. With sustainable tourism now a global priority, the Philippines' dive sector offers a competitive edge, combining ecotourism, job creation, and high-value spending that can drive growth across coastal communities. The Transportation Department launches a nationwide crackdown on fixers and fake license syndicates as part of the President's push for cleaner and more credible governance. Despite his courtesy resignation, Transport Secretary Vince Dizon remains at the helm, spearheading a reform drive that could rebuild trust in public services and reduce corruption risks across the sector. Our mobility correspondent, G. Baroga, has the details.
Seryoso kami dito. Baka iniisip ng iba yung mga ginagawang mga suspension ng lisensya, show cause order, revocation, ngayon lang yan. Hindi. Habang nandito kami sa kwestong to, ang kabilin-bilin ng Pangulo, go after all of them.
The DOTR isn't messing around. Secretary Vince Dizon says they're cracking down for real, and it's not just a one-time campaign. Under direct orders from PBBM, they're going after all forms of corruption and negligence in the transport system. As part of this cleanup, the DOTR and the LTO are fixing long-standing issues, including going after fixers and driving schools that are breaking the rules.
We have already suspended, sir, around 107 driving schools. Just in the last 2 weeks, nahuli na audit trail namin yan. in various regions nationwide.
The driving schools are located in Central Luzon, Calabarzon, and Metro Manila. According to the LTO, these schools were skipping crucial requirements like making sure applicants actually show up for the training or follow the proper steps for the theoretical driving course. Now, the LTO says it's full speed ahead on making the licensing process smoother and faster.
There are reforms in place that soon we will announce na talagang gumaganda na po ang ating servisyo. Yung mga pagkakamali, yung kulang nung nakaraan, yung natakpan po natin yan, dinalipin natin sa ayos.
And while they're fixing the system, they're also going after those who are taking advantage of it online. The DOTR, LTO, and the PNP Anti-Cybercrime Group have presented one of the suspects they caught selling fake driver's licenses and PWD IDs on the internet, a violation of the Cybercrime Prevention Act.
Kung ikaw yung nagbebenta ng lisensya na hindi dadaan sa requisitos ng pagkuha ng lisensya, lalong-lalo na yung practical exam, malaking problema. At isa yan sa mga malaking problemang kailangan natin ayusin.
Yung ating nahuling suspect ay makakalabas na po siya pagka siya ay nakapagpiyansa. So, 10 counts of falsified documents po yung ating naikaso at bawat count po na naikaso natin ay meron siyang 36,000 pesos na piyansa.
As for the bigger picture, Secretary Dizon says the crackdown won't stop anytime soon, and he's asking the public to help out. He encourages social media users and the media to tag transport agencies whenever they spot anything fishy, so authorities can validate and take action. For BNC Mobility, G. Baroga.
A motorcycle taxi platform is pushing back hard after a government order that threatens to sideline thousands of its riders. Move It files a new appeal to stay on the road, not just in Metro Manila, but also in Cebu and in Cagayan de Oro. The company says this isn't just about operations, it's about jobs, fairness, and clarity in regulation. Our mobility correspondent G. Baroga returns with this report.
Motorcycle taxi platform Move It isn't backing down just yet. The company has filed a supplemental appeal with the LTFRB, pushing back against an April order that told them to stop operations in Cebu and Cagayan de Oro and cut back their riders in Metro Manila. This isn't their first move either, as it had already submitted a motion for reconsideration, which is why the DOTR hasn't enforced the order yet. Everything's still on pause for now while the appeal plays out.
Kine-question kasi namin yung proseso kung paano sila nakapaglabas ng ganong order. So, yun naman yung laman ng final namin ngayon. No? Paano sila nakapaglabas ng ganong order na hindi namin nakita yung ibang miyembro ng DWG na pumirma doon sa order na yon.
Jacinto insists Move It followed the 15,000 rider cap set by the technical working group, based on their official guidelines, not press releases. He also points out that Move It was the only operator singled out in the rider cutback. All they're asking, he says, is fair treatment for operators and riders who depend on them. Another reason for the appeal is the impact on morale. Jacinto shares their riders are understandably worried, and the company wants them to know they've got their backs.
We always do that. No? We communicate with our riders through the team. Binibigyan namin sila assurance na sa laban na to, no, nandun naman kami lagi sa likod nila. At hindi naman namin papabayaan na mawala sila ng hanap buhay.
Move It is now calling on the government to take a deeper look at the case, especially with about 14,000 families potentially affected across Metro Manila, Cebu, and CDO.
Lagi naman kami handang makipagtulungan sa gobyerno, sa regulators, sa body ng government, para maisaayos ang lahat. Kasi nga, at the end of the day, kinakailangan namin ang tulong ng lahat ng stakeholders nang sa ganun, mabigyan natin ng magandang kabuhayan at kinabukasan yung mga riders na umaasa sa atin.
One thing he seemed to make clear is that no strikes are on the table. He says the focus is still on giving passengers top-notch service, especially with the EDSA rebuild happening soon. As for the LTFRB, spokesperson Ariel Inton clarifies the decision wasn't theirs alone. It was a group call made by the TWG, led by LTFRB Chairman Chofi Luguadis. Inton also adds that the agency remains open to talks with transport groups. For BNC Mobility, G. Baroga.
We're taking a quick breather. Business 360 will be right back. Welcome back. The legal battle over U.S. tariff policy takes center stage as the Court of International Trade holds its first hearing on a multi-state lawsuit challenging President Donald Trump's reciprocal tariffs. A 3-judge panel heard arguments from a dozen U.S. states seeking to block the implementation of Trump's April 2 tariff order. Oregon's Attorney General argued that the president misused the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, a law intended to limit, not expand, executive authority on trade. The Trump administration is now facing at least 7 lawsuits linked to its tariff strategy, which could affect global supply chains, exporters, and emerging markets like the Philippines. China condemns the U.S. reciprocal tariffs during a high-level meeting at the World Trade Organization in Geneva, calling it a threat to global trade stability. In a statement during the WTO's second General Council meeting, China warns that the tariffs undermine the multilateral trading system and weaken the global economy. It argues that the measures hurt developing nations and urges members to defend the WTO's core values against unilateralism and protectionism. China also calls for restructuring global trade and supply chains through lower barriers, mutual respect, and efforts to identify new trade growth areas. A deadly shooting outside the Capitol Jewish Museum in Washington prompts federal charges after 2 Israeli embassy workers are killed in what U.S. officials describe as a diplomatic security breach. The lone suspect, a 30-year-old, Elias Rodriguez, allegedly opened fire on a group of attendees Wednesday night following an event for young diplomats hosted by the American Jewish Committee. Authorities say he chanted "Free Palestine" while being taken into custody. Rodriguez now faces multiple charges, including first-degree murder, murder of foreign officials, causing death with a firearm, and discharging a weapon in a crime of violence.
Anti-Semitism will not be tolerated, especially in the nation's capital. Now, we're going to continue to investigate this as a hate crime and a crime of terrorism, and we will add additional charges as the evidence warrants. So this charging today is the initial charge. Remember, we're less than 24 hours from the crime itself.
The attack heightens tensions amid growing geopolitical strains in the Middle East and comes as governments worldwide reevaluate embassy security, diplomatic engagements, and the spillover risks of international conflict. On another front, a verdict is expected this Friday in the high-profile case involving the 2016 armed robbery of billionaire businesswoman and media personality Kim Kardashian in Paris. 10 suspects, 9 men and 1 woman are on trial for allegedly robbing Kardashian at gunpoint in her luxury hotel room during Paris Fashion Week. They made off with over $10 million worth of jewelry in one of the most expensive celebrity heists in recent history. Kardashian, who testified on May 13th, described being tied up with zip ties and duct tape by armed men posing as police officers. 5 suspects face life in prison for armed robbery and kidnapping. Others are charged with complicity or illegal possession of a firearm. The case highlights growing concerns over the security of high net worth individuals in global fashion and luxury hubs like Paris, and sparks wider conversations about personal risk management in an era where celebrity brands hold billions in assets. And that's it for Business 360. I'm Maiki Oreta. Thank you for joining us. Keep it here on BNC, the Bilyonaryo News Channel, and have a good weekend.